The protagonist of this story, Ghislaine Perdium, has a reputation for being an uncontrollable swordmaster, a man stuck in his room, out of his mind, and to top it off, the useless oldest son of Count Perdium. With all these glorified titles, you might think he's just some spoiled brat, but nope, that's not the case, at least not anymore. And his opponent is finding that out the hard way. This bearded bastard can barely believe his eyes as he's getting his ass handed to him by this so-called useless son of a gun. Ghislaine, on the other hand, is as cool as a cucumber during the battle. He's actually pretty glad that all the money he spent on setting this trap is finally paying off. So he asks this bearded bastard if he's enjoying the surprise. Of course, this infuriates the bearded bastard, because it's like Ghislaine knew exactly what was going to happen. Well, Ghislaine doesn't hesitate to own up to it. It's not just that he knew his enemy's plans. He knew everything from the start. He knew how many soldiers there were, who the spies were, and who helped this guy with reinforcements. He knew literally everything. The bearded bastard can hardly believe it. He starts shouting in disbelief. He is mad that his ace card has also been exposed by someone he thought was useless trash. But Ghislaine isn't having any of it. He shuts the guy up with a solid kick to the face, making it clear that this yapping fool can keep talking all he wants. But no matter how many battles take place, Ghislaine is certain that he is going to win. You might be wondering how he is going to win every time. Well, it is because my guy literally knows everything. Now let's rewind a bit. Almost a year ago, in the Kingdom of Lithuania, near the Perdium estate, Ghislaine Perdium wakes up to a shock. He's alive, but he shouldn't be. He was supposed to be dead. The last thing Ghislaine remembers is being in the middle of a losing battle, facing off against one of the continent's top 7 noble knights, a guy named Idun, who was supposed to be the one to take him down. Ghislaine, on the other hand, was no slouch himself. He held the title of one of the continent's top 7 mercenary kings, known far and wide as Ghislaine Perdium. Before ending Ghislaine's life, Idun remarks how he did not expect to encounter the trash of a fallen Perdium household. As far as Idun knows, Ghislaine had left the family after his sister's death, so it seemed like his name had faded from memory. Ghislaine is surprised to hear this, and asks this bastard how he knows so much about him and his past. Idun claims that he had known this for a long time. He'd worked tirelessly to track Ghislaine down because he was one of them, someone who had worked alongside the Delphine household to bring the Perdium family to its knees. The mention of one of them catches our boy off guard, because this means that it wasn't just the Delphine household behind the downfall of his family. There were others involved, and now, one of them was standing right in front of him. It was then that his disdain and thirst for revenge skyrocketed, and right at that moment, Idun cut his head clean off. But when our boy woke up, he found himself in one piece, even though his head was decapitated. Not only does he not have a single scratch on his body, but he also looks quite young. He starts looking around, unsure of what's going on, and right at that moment, someone calls out to him with the title of Young Master, telling him to come on out. This man is actually Perdium's soldier, Ricardo, but the poor guy finds a sharp sword pointed at his neck while our boy demands that he quickly answer his questions. Of course, the soldier on duty has no idea what's going on, so he just agrees to answer anything his master asks of him, though he wonders why his master has to point a sword just to ask a few questions. Well, Ghislaine is also quite surprised by this, because he wasn't expecting this kind of reaction from someone he considers an enemy. Ricardo quickly yanks himself out of his master's grasp, reminding him that he tired himself out from his tantrum earlier and fell asleep. He was stressed out about how he is going to command the group to raid the orcs. As you can imagine, this doesn't make any sense to our boy, while the soldier tells him to grab his stuff and get out because the people are waiting for him outside. Our boy has no clue where they're going, to which Ricardo reveals that they're heading to the Perdium estate. The mention of his family name completely baffles him, because as far as he remembers, the Perdium estate had fallen. As they reach the place, Ghislaine takes a bird's-eye view from the hill, which clears up any lingering doubts that it's definitely the Perdium estate, even though he had already seen it reduced to ashes back then. Ricardo under his breath tries to inquire why our boy keeps calling his own house a fallen one, as he might get kicked out if the Count hears it. Just like any sane person, Ghislaine pinches his cheek to see if he's dreaming. But well, the pain is very real, so he guesses he's not. He reflects on how he now has a younger face. His estate is also in good shape, and if he can piece all things together, this only means he's traveled back to the past. You see, his younger self resented the household, and the immaturity born from feeling inferior led to trouble. As more time passed, more people from the household started to avoid him, and he couldn't withstand the criticism, so he ran away from home. But several years later, he became a mercenary. He survived countless battles, built up his skills, and made a name for himself. He returned to the Perdium country to make up for his past mistakes, but by the time he got back, his household had already been crushed to dust. So, our boy lost everything, but it's all still here, once again. All the people he held dear are still here. He can barely contain his excitement to see that he's gotten another shot at life, but it's too early to rejoice. From what he's learned from Ricardo, they're here to raid the orcs. He vividly remembers that day. It was the day most of the people in his raid squad would die. In his past life, he had followed the orc raid squad in an attempt to make a name for himself. At that time, the report had said there were only 3 orcs, so Ghislain had thought it would be easy enough for someone like him, who had no experience commanding a squad. But when he got there were more than 20 orcs. Almost all of them ended up dying because of his foolishness and stubbornness. Right now, my guy is confident that it should be doable enough since those orcs don't really have a strategy. But the problem is whether his soldiers will trust him, considering they all think he's some useless bastard. It looks like he does not have any time to prepare, because a watchtower is just obliterated as the horde of orcs comes charging in. My guy is absolutely boggled out of his mind at the sight because he was not expecting these damned creatures to attack so early. The orcs are literally demolishing the soldiers left and right, and each orc is strong enough to take down multiple foot soldiers on its own without much effort. The raid squad commander Skoven also jumps into the scene and tells everyone to get into a defensive formation. But it doesn't seem like any formation or strategy would work against these brute monsters who are literally slaughtering people left and right. Even Skoven is sure they're screwed because, seriously, getting ambushed when they weren't even prepared at all is just brutal. Not only that, but there are way more of these damned monsters than expected, and the way things are going, he's certain they're all going to die for sure. Suddenly, someone calls out to the commander, and when he turns around, he notices a massive monster about to crush him with its axe. It seems like the commander doesn't have much time to move away to save his life. That's when our guy launches himself and yanks the commander away, then brutally cuts through the monster's hand like it's nothing more than a cucumber. Everyone is absolutely jaw-dropped to see how effortlessly Ghislain pulled off that move. After all, he is supposed to be a trash. The monster finally falls down, while Ghislain feels annoyed that his body still can't use mana. He then walks back to the commander, extends his hand, and demands the commander's rights. But it seems like the commander doesn't think some useless idiot should be commanding the soldiers when everyone's life is on the line, so he flatly refuses. He further asks our boy if he actually thinks this is some kind of game. Even if Ghislain is the young master, Skoven simply just can't give up the authority that the Lord gave him that easily. Well, our guy already figured that no one would trust him, and he's pissed. Another monster comes charging at them, but Skoven quickly gets in the middle of things, since he considers our boy an inexperienced idiot to lead their troops. Well, it looks like Ghislain has no choice but to show these damned fools what he's got. So he sends his sword flying at the monster with godly speed. The commander quickly starts to berate Ghislain for the insubordination, but his yapping is immediately shut up when he notices that the orc charging at them has been dealt with literally a single blow from the sword. It drops dead right away. Of course, this leaves the bastard looking like he's going through some serious constipation. Meanwhile, our guy questions this fool if he even knows the most important thing in battles. Of course, the commander doesn't know, since he's the actual useless trash here. So, Ghislain shifts his attention to the terrified soldiers and reminds Skoven that there's no hope in winning a battle when their troops are filled with fear. The first thing they should be doing is to gain momentum. With that said, our guy dashes once again, grabs his sword that was lodged in the monster's head, and leaps into the air. He lands right on top of another orc and thrusts his sword into the monster's skull. Skoven can barely believe his eyes. But our boy, on the other hand, just tells all the monsters to just come at him if they want to be killed. Of course, these foolish creatures quickly start charging at our boy, and he swings his sword like a ninja on caffeine, cutting through every one of these bastards who tries to get in his way. His speed, movements, reflexes, everything is so fast, and everything is happening so quickly that Skoven has no reaction but to stare in utter disbelief. Even as a mana user, it's hard for him to do anything, so how that skinny young master is even doing all of this? Though Skoven can tell that our boy is getting tired, he's still using the smallest of movements to dodge attacks, and his swordsmanship is striking their weak spots, like a manaless swordmaster, or perhaps even something greater. But our guy isn't ready to give up yet. He tries to trigger these mindless monsters by asking if this is all they've got since they're not living up to their reputation as a warrior species. The other soldiers also stare in utter disbelief, seeing that all the orcs are charging at the young master. Everyone calls to their commander for his next order, but this bastard is too cowardly to show the courage our boy is displaying. He can't get over the fact that our boy ran into a group of orcs and drew their attention in order to make them chase him. He doesn't seem to understand why he is running now, and why he's running toward the edge of a cliff. It doesn't take long for him to realize that Ghislain is planning to send those orcs plummeting off the cliff. Acting fast, he orders his troops to raise their shield wall as they prepare to follow the young master's lead. Meanwhile, the orcs are hot on our boy's heels. He's pretty sure Skoven, being a skilled commander, will figure out his plan. Although he'd love to slice all those orcs down himself, His crappy stamina won't allow it. Still, this idea is not bad either. Once he finally reaches the edge of the cliff, the orcs notice soldiers positioned behind them in a defensive stance. Without hesitation, our boy jumps off the cliff, signaling to Skovan to execute the plan. The soldiers charge at the monsters, and with one push, the orcs are sent tumbling off the cliff to their bloody deaths. The effort pays off and every last one of them is taken out. The soldiers are left exhausted, but Skovan is completely stunned when he notices our boy still hanging onto the cliffside, his sword lodged into the rock. Despite the situation, there's not a hint of fear on his face, just a confident smirk aimed straight at his commander. For a moment, the big mustached Skovan is startled, but then he breaks into a proud smile. He quickly extends his hand, but it's too short to reach the young master, and the grip our boy had on his sword eventually loosens. The boy starts to fall, leaving everyone bewildered by this unexpected turn of events. Meanwhile, Ghislain begins to descend into the realm of unconsciousness, where he hears his sister's voice and fragments of memories of her. He's not sure what's going on, and right at that moment, his sister grabs his hand and he is yanked out of his dream. He wakes up to find himself in bed, and the first thing that comes to his mind is how he's even alive. He tries to sit up, but his entire body hurts like hell from the movements, making him crawl up in pain. His whole body aches. It must be the consequence of pushing his limits. At least, this pain assures him that he is alive. Right at that moment, a maid walks into the room, looking quite happy to see her master awake. It doesn't take our boy long to recognize her as Belinda, while the girl expresses her frustration through her words, talking about how much stress he's caused her. That's when Ghislain rushes at her and hugs her tightly. She has no clue why he's acting like this, but we all know he's just glad to see her again after so many years. You see, she used to be his personal maid. Belinda had been by his side since he was little. Despite the mess he used to cause, she was the only one who stayed with him. But after the family fell to ruin, she went missing, and he never thought he'd get to see her again like this. That's when he decides to tell Belinda the truth. He starts dropping some serious truth bombs, saying that a catastrophe will soon strike Perdium, and that the truth is, he died, and came back to life. But of course, Belinda doesn't take him seriously. She agrees that the orcs nearly killed him, but she doesn't believe his wild story. He tries to explain it to her again, but she just starts berating him for his reckless moves. Eventually, he decides to give up, since she's not going to believe him anyway. She reminds him of the upcoming festival, something he might have missed if he were injured. The mention of the festival catches our boy off guard, and seeing his clueless reaction, the lady decides to remind him that Lady Elena has been waiting for the day to go to the festival with him. It would be a great chance for the two siblings to get close to each other again. Finally, Ghislain remembers that there was always a festival around this time of year, and in his past life, he didn't have time to enjoy it because of his traumatic experiences. He then asks her how much time left before the festival starts, to which she responds that since it's next week, he has about a week left. The fact that he remembers this seemingly random festival is because it was the day a traumatic tragedy happened, one that haunted him for the rest of his life. Apparently, on the day of the festival, his sister Elena is supposed to die. With the speak of the devil, his sister enters the room, and our guy rushes to hug her as soon as he can. The young lady is bewildered to see such a passionate hug coming from her brother out of the blue. She starts to blush and asks him if he's trying to pull some kind of prank. But little does she know, his brotherly love for her is sincere. But since he's not letting go, the lady herself yanks him out of her embrace. This leaves Ghislain's weakling body struggling for a moment, because his sister has got some crazy strength. It seems like Elena and he don't get along, because she flat out makes it clear she's only here to visit him because Belinda invited her. Apparently, these two siblings don't have the best relationship, and Elena vividly remembers the time he insulted her. Of course, Ghislain is pretty clueless about when he insulted her, but now that he remembers, he realizes he wasn't exactly close with Elena in his past life. Let's be real, he was kind of a total piece of trash. So he actually apologizes, which catches both ladies completely off guard. Ghislain admitting his mistakes is totally unheard of. Naturally, they assume it must be because he got smacked around by the orcs and received some brain damage. But my guy shuts that down real quick, saying he actually did get them. Right at that moment, though, pain shoots through him and he doubles over. This gives Elena the perfect chance to mock him even more, as it's pretty clear who really got who. As much as those remarks might seem a bit sharp, they're not really insulting at all. In fact, Ghislain feels totally warmed by their characters and smiles in response, thinking everyone is exactly as he remembers them. He can't help but wonder why the old him wasted so much time on pointless things. You see, during the festival next week, Ghislain rejected Elena's offer to go together, and made an excuse that the events from the raid squad had upset him. That was the last time he saw her, and after that, Elena's body was found, shredded to pieces, along with her bodyguards. Even to this day, Ghislain regrets not being with her at that time. Suddenly, a knock on the door catches their attention. It's a bunch of knights, apparently, her bodyguards. The guy with dark brown hair is Jamal, and the one standing just behind him is Philip. Elena asks why they've come, since they were told to wait outside. The man apologizes and says that the servants want her to oversee their work on the festival supplies. Hearing this, Ghislaine gets confused. He wonders why they'd ask Elena to do that. Belinda, once again, seems a bit disappointed to see Ghislaine acting clueless, so she reminds him that there's a shortage of workers in Perdium, and even the young lady needs to help out. This is actually news to Ghislaine, because back then, he never really cared about what was going on, so it's obvious he doesn't know. Now that he's here, though, he decides to help out. Once again, his little sister is surprised to hear this, and both of the girls wonder if he really did get hit over the head. Later, we arrive at the bustling festival area, where everyone is rushing to prepare their stalls before the festival kicks off. But all of them start getting a bit creeped out when they hear that Ghislaine wants to help too. Meanwhile, his sister is still trying to push him away, asking how they can treat someone who wants to help. The best way he can help, she says, is to stay out of their way and out of trouble. But Ghislaine is not ready to leave her alone here. Her body was found near the slums, far from the festival grounds. Someone must have called her out there or forcibly moved her. To prevent that from happening again, he needs to learn the ins and outs of the castle first. Right at that moment, a knight comes rushing in, calling out to Ghislaine. It's one of the knights, known as Old Man Fergus. The old man is out of breath but doesn't take a moment to rest. He starts crying, mentioning how concerned he was when he heard about the orc incident. His sister chimes in too, mentioning how he's been acting really strange lately. She thinks it'd be better if Fergus takes him back. Well, it looks like Ghislaine has no choice but to give in. He tells the old man to take him to the abandoned training field in the castle. The old man asks, a bit curiously, why he wants to go there. Ghislaine just responds that he wants to train. The big mustached man is not sure what the young master is up to, but he doesn't question Ghislaine's judgment any further. He takes him to the training hall. Upon entering, the first thing Ghislaine notices is that the training hall is in much better condition than he expected. It's a perfect location for him to train, and the equipment is something he's never seen, even in his mercenary days. The old man explains that they've kept it maintained in case Ghislaine ever wished to use these facilities. The old man has always had faith that Ghislaine would recover from whatever mental struggle he's been going through. Seeing how concerned the old man is, our boy is forced to reflect on how much the old man has tried to help him all along. He literally had no clue about any of this, and now he feels sad for not realizing it sooner. He then gives the old man a pat on the shoulder and assures him that dying feels like crap, so he plans to live long enough. As usual, the old man is bewildered to hear him talk as if he's already experienced life and death. But Ghislaine quickly agrees, casually telling him that he did, in fact, die and was resurrected. But of course, the old man finds this nonsense. Anyhow, Ghislaine decides to start training, dismissing the old man and telling him he can go. Seeing Fergus paying so much respect to him, Ghislaine reflects on how he's always treated everyone around him like they were his enemies. But now, looking back, he realizes he was just short-sighted. Whatever the case, Ghislaine gets back to the main work he has to do. In his previous life, he has heard that one behind Elena's death was a lord from a neighboring territory. Because of that, Perdium got caught up in a war, which eventually led to its downfall. Elena's death was essentially the starting point for his house's collapse. This means he needs to set things right from here on out. First things first, he needs to get a better physique. It sucks that he doesn't have a lot of time, but he's sure he can at least get control over his mana. Mana is a supernatural resource that allows humans to break through their limits, and most people say that noticing and absorbing mana is the hardest part. But for Ghislaine, he was able to do that, even on the chaotic battlefield. He has to connect the mana particles floating in the air and bundle them up, almost like spinning a spool. For someone like him, who's experienced tens of thousands, of battles, creating a mana core is a piece of cake. But if it were that easy, he wouldn't be part of the strongest 7 of the land. Using the method from that half-burned book on magic he picked up, and with the natural mana core humans have, Ghislaine is able to create a second and even a third. He connects them in a mesh of multiple cores to create an explosive force. All this pushing his limits causes blood to leak from his mouth and nose, his face drenched in sweat. I guess he's reached his current limit. Although he was able to reach 5 cores in his past life, this technique is all about creating an explosive force in a short time. The catch is that it requires an extremely large amount of mana in return. This was the main reason he lost to Eden in his past life, who had brought an entire knight order when he was already out of mana. If it had been a fair fight, he definitely would have won. The technique is inherently unstable, but for now, it's good enough. Besides, this time, he has a youthful body and plenty of time to master it. He's determined that he'll claim Eden's head this time, and those bastards backing House Delphine, who helped destroy their country, they're going down too. Fast forward a week, and the day of the festival finally arrives. Our boy is ready, fully equipped, and walking through town with unshakable confidence. But as he strolls, he spots his sister standing there, who is surprised to see him. She's shocked that her brother, who's never been a fan of festivals, actually showed up. Not only that, but he's been acting super odd lately, and she's heard he's done nothing but train for the past week. Ghislaine tries to brush it off, reminding her that as the next in line of a knight family, training is just a natural thing for him. But she throws a brutal curveball, reminding him how he's always hated the idea of being lord, which is one of the main reasons he never got along with their father. Despite the jab, she starts to walk away with a smile over her face, as she is glad to see him finally acting like he was supposed to. Her remark forces Ghislaine to reflect on how his actions have started to change, not just how people perceive him, but also the trajectory of his future. The general flow of events might still be the same, but it's becoming harder to gauge the impact of his actions on the smaller details. Making good use of his knowledge of the future is now his responsibility, and he needs to respond to each situation effectively. With that said, he is ready to face his sister's killers. Later, he spends time with his sister, staying on high alert. After a while, though, Elena gets tired, commenting that there's nothing special about the festival. It's just like every other year. Meanwhile, Ghislaine is deep in thought, realizing the festival is almost over and yet nothing significant has happened. This leads him to believe that maybe the future has shifted because he's been sticking close to Elena. But just as that thought crosses his mind, her bodyguards show up. They suggest taking her to a livelier area of the festival to have some fun. As they begin escorting her away, Ghislaine quickly pieces things together. He deduces that it must be these bastards, the traitors of their house. Elena's escort knights, Jamal and Philip, are the most trusted knights in the family. They've been protecting Elena since she was a child, and it was known that they were murdered while protecting her in Ghislaine's past life. But now Ghislaine has lingering doubts. It must be a trap, and he is sure that these guys are the traitors of their house. So he decides to follow the knights. The place they arrive at is completely empty, which leaves Elena clearly annoyed, and she starts complaining. While she complains, Ghislaine's suspicions grow even stronger. At first, the street might seem like a simple deserted one, but looking at the way the obstacles block the escape routes, it's clear that preparations were made in advance. He's soon shaken out of his thoughts when his sister starts dragging him with her. Seeing how strong her grip is, Ghislaine can't help but to ask her if she has been hitting the gym lately, because she is too strong for a young lady. But just then, Jamal stops her, and the look on his face makes it clear that he doesn't have good intentions. Elena starts to shiver and begins to panic, wondering why they're acting so strange. Jamal quickly apologizes for the scary look, but then his expression twists into something even more unsettling. He tells her that he just wants her to wait a little longer. It's only a small request. Elena feels scared and hopeless, and just at that moment, someone walks into the scene. It's a guy with glasses, followed closely by two of his goons. The guy's name is Frank, and he's clearly pleased to see how effectively Jamal has executed the plan. He then questions Jamal about Ghislaine, because he does not remember requesting this sucker to be here. Jamal reassures his boss that he'll take care of this brat and that Frank doesn't even need to pay for it. He explains that Ghislaine foolishly followed his sister without realizing he was walking straight into his own grave. Finally, Ghislaine speaks up. The first thing he wants to ask this filthy bastard how he is going to get away after betraying Perdium family. The bastard just snickers with little to no fear, claiming that all he has to do is run away to some far-off place. Besides, he's tired of this poverty-stricken land that's already been torn apart by barbarians. He's sure that it's not just him, but plenty of others want to leave Perdium too. But before he can finish speaking, my guy cuts him off. Instead of words, blood pours from his mouth. The sight is enough to shock everyone watching. As the traitor falls to the ground in two pieces, my guy looks at him furious. He reminds this sucker that even if people are leaving this place, they never betrayed them. He is absolutely livid and shoots a deadly glare at the other bastard, who, in a panic, pulls Lena closer, hoping to escape the same fate as his friend. But well, he doesn't make it. A sword pierces his skull and the bastard trembles, choking on his last breaths. The lackeys who came with Frank start second-guessing whether they should even fight. What baffles them more is if this guy is really the eldest son of Perdium. As far as they know, he doesn't have any real combat experience or basic training. Frank, though, is convinced he's the eldest son, but he still can't wrap his head around how this guy managed to take down two men so effortlessly. And, more shocking, his attacks were infused with mana. Meanwhile, the girl clings to her brother, trembling, but he knocks her out with a quick hit to her neck, telling her to take a little rest. Frank, the bastard, shows his gratitude to our guy for taking down the two knights, claiming they were planning to handle them themselves. He even compliments our guy on his godlike skills and can't help but ask where he learned them. But Ghislaine is not obligated to reply to them, so he shuts them down immediately, reminding them that it is none of their business. He then sizes them up, 3 in total, but only the one in the middle is radiating any significant mana. But whatever the case, my guy is ready to finish this quickly. Before making a move, he demands to know who hired them for the ambush. Frank, with a smug grin, brushes off the question, implying that someone about to die shouldn't care about such things. Well, Ghislain knows these bastards won't give up the information easily, but he has his own ways of making them talk. One of the lackeys suggests severing his head, but the boss shuts him down because he wants him alive, as he plans to break every limb in his body until he's completely helpless. His goal is to leave him in agony, unable to do anything but writhe in pain, believing that the suffering must be as drawn out and excruciating as possible. With that, the two of the goons charge at him. Anticipating this, Ghislain pulls out a firecracker and throws at them. The unexpected move from our boy startles one of the lackeys for a split second, leaving him confused as to why someone would use a firecracker. That brief moment of distraction is all Ghislain needs. In the blink of an eye, he strikes, killing one of the goons instantly. The second lackey charges next, but Ghislain is ready. He quickly blocks the attack with ease, disarms the attacker, and yanks the sword from his hands. Finally, he follows through, cutting the man down as if it's nothing. As soon as the lackeys drop, their leader doesn't waste any time and tries to attack our guy from behind like a coward. But my guy's reflexes are on another level, and he blocks the attack without much effort. The bastard is left stunned, realizing his nearly perfect sneak attack has been completely ruined. Not wasting any time, my guy decides to retaliate. He moves so fast with his sword that Frank barely has time to react. The sword cuts deep across the bastard's throat, and the pipe he had in his mouth falls to the ground. The bastard tries to recover and launches another attack, but once again, my guy blocks it with ease. Frank quite frankly admits that his throat would have been completely sliced if he hadn't used mana. Even my guy is impressed, realizing that this bastard concentrated all the mana around his neck to reduce the damage. It's insane how he managed to pull that off. That's when Frank finally decides to show what he's really got. Gripping his sword as tightly as he can, he launches himself at our boy. But then, he notices the grin on our boy's face. That grin catches him off guard for a moment. It's almost like my guy wanted this to happen. And that's when Ghislain overpowers this bastard and lands a solid kick straight to his face. Frank manages to land on his feet instead of tumbling over and smirks, claiming that with his mana levels, that kind of move won't work. But then he's proven dead wrong when he suddenly starts coughing up a copious amount of blood. Frank's face twists in confusion as he has no idea what just happened. Even with thick mana reinforcing his entire body, he's in disbelief. How did Ghislain manage to pierce through his enhancement with sheer skill alone? Meanwhile, Ghislain thinks about how he never found out about the culprit behind his sister's death, but now that he knows, he's ready to make this bastard pay. He warns Frank to prepare for the worst. With that, Ghislain activates his third core. The bastard just stares in disbelief, but he doesn't have time to process it, because Ghislain is already in his face. The two clash at a speed so intense that all you can see are the trails left by their blades. Frank is giving it everything he's got, but it's clear he can't keep up. His hands are already going numb, and no matter how much mana he draws, it's not enough. His sword begins to crack under the pressure. He's never heard of a technique that can boost mana so explosively, let alone with this level of precision. It's like Ghislain has become a completely different person, and that different person lands a devastating blow that gives a nasty cut on Frank's body. But Ghislain isn't done yet. He drives his blade into his sister's killer with full force, but he doesn't let him die. There are burning questions he needs answered. Through gritted teeth, he demands to know who ordered the hit on Elena. But it looks like Ghislain isn't about to get his answers easily from this bastard. The sucker quickly pulls out these sneaky ninja daggers, but before he can throw them at Elena, some sort of threads block his hand from moving further. And the one holding those threads is our boy. Ghislain decides to give this bastard another chance to talk. If he answers everything right, he promises to sheath his sword. Meanwhile, Frank's mind is once again officially blown when he realizes that the threads our boy is controlling are made of mana. Meanwhile, Ghislain is sure someone of his caliber would know how to patch himself up. But well, not that it would matter if my guy destroys this bastard's mana core. So, without a second thought, Ghislain starts pouring some magic energy into the sword he's already stuck in the bastard's belly. The bastard screams in pain as he feels his mana core shattering. This is one hell of a move our guy is pulling off, because one wrong step and the backflow of mana could cause an explosion and blow this whole area to pieces. It literally feels like Ghislain is trying to self-destruct. But you see, my guy isn't some unskilled amateur. He can handle it pretty easily. Even this long-haired bastard can tell that Ghislain isn't bluffing. With the way things are going, he knows he's as good as dead. When he stares into Ghislain's eyes, all he sees is a bloodthirsty reaper. So, Frank decides to be a little wise for once, and finally slips out the name of Count Desmond, the real mastermind behind these assassination orders. He further admits that this whole setup is supposed to be a pretext to start a war against Perdium and Degard families. Seems like Ghislain doesn't have a good impression of this name, because in his previous life, Such underground work was left to the families allied with the ducal houses. And if his guess is right, he is sure that it's Duke Delphine who orchestrated this nonsense. Anyhow, the fact remains that this glasses guy was here to take his sister's life. So my guy makes sure to take this bastard down as well to get his revenge from his previous life. Frank is in disbelief, thinking Ghislaine is backing down from his previous words. But our hero just reminds this bastard of all the sins he's committed, so this sucker has no right to feel terrified when it's finally his turn to become the victim. But to our boy's surprise, the bastard begins snickering even in his last breaths. This bastard is sure that nothing will change, even if our boy kills him, since he's already finished the work with the Degard family. He makes it clear that Perdium will perish due to the war, no matter what. Ghislaine quickly puts his hand over this bastard's filthy mouth to stop him from yapping. He lets this shithead in on a secret that he has reawakened after dying, so he's not about to let the past repeat itself this time. Those were the final words Frank heard before our guy cranked up the mana core shattering process. The mana inside backflows, and Ghislaine directs it into the sky, causing it to explode with a big bang like some twisted firework. Ghislaine is also out of breath, but at least all of the people involved have already been dealt with. He then takes notice of his unconscious sister, who seems safe and sleeping soundly. As he just closes his eyes to relax his muscles, a mouthful of blood leaks from his mouth, and he doubles over because of the pain. He reflects that exploding 3 cores wasn't an issue at all back when he was the Mercenary King, but his weak body is limiting his potential this time. But this is still not enough to make him back down. He quickly rushes to a nearby home where he finds a dead body. In his previous life, the officials had found another body besides Elena's at this place, and according to what Frank said earlier, this body is apparently the son of Degard. There's also another dead body, the escort knight who was killed in the process. This is apparently how the Perdium family in his previous life came to the conclusion that Degard family must be the one involved in the assassination of Elena. The moment these bodies were found, the war would start. So Ghislaine decides to leave no evidence behind. After torching the entire house, he takes his sister and begins to walk away. That's when we notice this dickhead cap guy in the shadows, keeping an eye on our boy. Later, he arrives at the council of all the shady people running this game and reports back that the mission has failed. It goes without saying that the big shots are not thrilled to hear this, and the hooded guy tries to argue that it was all because of Ghislaine Perdium. The name catches their attention, because how could a useless bastard from the north pull off such a big move? One of the big shots also claims that as far as he knows, Ghislaine is a useless piece of shit, so he's not sure why this reporter is using him as an excuse for their failed mission. But the guy tries to argue that Ghislaine was completely different from the information and rumors they had about him. The way he handled everything with such finesse made him feel like a completely different person. He tries to assure his masters that he has already taken care of things with Degard, so starting the territorial war won't be an issue. He begs for one more chance to prove himself. But the big shot gets angry, because the setback from this failure has caused immense trouble, and everyone in the council is losing their minds over it. They all collectively tell this bastard to just eliminate that bastard Ghislaine. That's when the big shot among the big shots speaks up and breaks the tension. He asks the hooded guy how he plans to handle that kid, to which the hooded guy states that he's going to make a duel happen naturally, and the one who is going to fight against Ghislaine is quite powerful. They ask who that guy is, to which the hooded guy explains that his name is Cain Loges, and he's famous for his strength-based swordsmanship. Despite his young age, he is the epitome of strength, and he's confident that there is no one in the north who can match his power. Not to mention, Cain is Ghislaine's cousin, so the hooded guy is sure it won't feel forced to have them meet. Everyone goes silent as they begin to consider this plan. The big shot, however, makes it clear that if this mission also ends in failure, there will be no next time. Terrified, the hooded guy quickly promises to deliver promising results this time. The scene transitions to the Perdium Castle training hall, where we see Fergus, who is here to announce mealtime to our boy. That's when Fergus notices a rope of mana coming at him. It grabs the sword hanging right beside him, and the mana rope quickly starts retracting back with the sword attached to it. After enough practice, Ghislaine is glad to see he's making progress. That's when he notices the old man, who promptly bows his head in front of our boy, apologizing for interrupting the training session. But the old man can't hide his curiosity, and asks how Ghislaine just did that. Ghislaine nonchalantly explains that it's mana threads, using mana like string. In his previous life, he used it all the time, but at his current skill level, he needs to implode his core to use it like he used to, because he currently lacks enough mana. However, if he just makes one thread to use less mana, my guy is confident he can still use it effectively, despite having a limited supply of mana. Fergus is sure he's trained his mana for a long time, but he's never seen anything like this before. Now that the old man thinks about it, he remembers that just a while ago, Ghislaine didn't even use mana, let alone train with it. He can't figure out how our boy came up with the idea of using mana like this. Anyhow, Fergus snaps his attention back to the task he came for. He humbly tilts his head slightly and expresses his gratitude for protecting the young lady. But Ghislaine doesn't see any need for anyone's gratitude. She's his sister, and he would have done the same unconditionally. A few days pass after that, and the festival is paused. It only makes sense since a guardian knight tried to traffic the young lady. We then meet Elena, whose face is far from pleasant. She seems quite annoyed that no one believes her when she says Ghislaine is the one who saved her. She asks her brother why he doesn't try to convince them, to which my guy just shrugs it off. He doesn't care, and besides, they wouldn't believe him either. Belinda's blood is boiling just thinking about how the culprits were actually Jamal and Philly, the ones who tried to take Elena out. Whatever the case, Ghislaine is glad his sister survived and that he was able to stop the war from happening. But he is sure that those bastards won't give up that easily, and he can't stop them on his own forever. So, he needs to grow his military force. Right at that moment, a maid arrives with food. When the maid serves him, Ghislaine finds it odd that he is being served a dry piece of bread instead of something delicious. He asks Belinda about it, to which she explains that it's one of the consequences of the recent mess. Right then, a fat sucker starts screaming out loud, demanding compensation for the damage caused by the festival's cancellation. And it's not just one fatty, there's a whole group of merchants protesting outside the castle. Their demand is simple. They want compensation for their losses. Our boy looks out the window and inquires about the angry mob. That's when Belinda reminds him that this country is full of merchants who make a living from the profits brought in by the festival. Last year the merchants had a great season, but since the festival was cancelled after just one day, it makes sense that they're furious. Ghislaine didn't realize until now just how badly his country is doing economically. He knows that if he doesn't meet the merchants' demands, the situation will only get more aggressive. So, he tells Fergus to command the soldiers to calm the angry mob down. But the old man casually replies that they don't have any soldiers. He explains that most of them have been dispatched to the Forest of Monsters for reconstruction because of the damage caused by the orc raid. Well, it seems like Ghislaine's situation is even more dire than he had thought. You see, Perdium is basically in a state of eternal war. To the north, they constantly have to deal with barbarians, and on the other side, there's the Forest of Monsters, from which monsters can appear at any moment. Since he doesn't have money, he won't have soldiers either, which only adds to his worries. He takes Belinda with him for a talk, and under his breath, he reminds her that since she's the one managing his money, they need to calm the merchants down somehow. But the lady breaks it down to him that there is no money left. When he asks why, she reminds him that the Lord cut off his allowance because he always spent the money like water. The thought of being broke disgusts him, so he demands that she lend him some money. But the lady says she doesn't have any either. All the odds seem to be against him. No money, no soldiers, what the hell does he even have? Without even the smallest amount of money, there's nothing he can do. Even with his knowledge of the future, he's going to need funds first to make any of it work. Just as he's thinking about it, Ricardo comes rushing in at full sprint. He's completely out of breath, and our boy quickly asks him what's going on and why he's in such a hurry. Ricardo, practically shouting at the top of his lungs, says there's a problem. Apparently, young Master Kane wishes to see our boy. The mention of Kane catches Ghislaine off guard. That's when we see one of our boy's knights, Commander Scoven, getting absolutely destroyed by Kane. Kane's jacked up muscles and sheer strength are literally crushing the knight's face like it's a tomato. Each punch lands with the force of a hammer, and it's clear Kane isn't holding back. The last punch finally knocks the poor knight out cold. Ghislaine arrives just in time to see his knight on the ground, totally injured. The look on Ghislaine's face makes it clear that our boy is not thrilled to see his knight in such a state. Anger burning in his eyes, he turns to face his cousin. The bastard in front of him is so huge that Ghislaine literally looks like a puny punk. The smile on the big guy's face is even terrifying. Along with this jacked up dude, there's also his escort knight. You see, the heir of the Logis County, with whom House Perdium had an alliance, is Kane Logis. He was both Ghislaine's only friend at the time, and his enemy. The big guy walks toward Ghislaine after beating up his knight. But Ghislaine doesn't flinch. He calmly asks Ricardo what exactly led to this situation. Ricardo quickly explains that they responded to a report of a disturbance at a tavern, where they found Kane and his escort knight. It is when Kane asked Commander Scoven if the rumors about young Master Ghislaine were true. So, Commander Scoven explained the details of the rumors about our boy. But that's when Kane grabs the commander by the mouth, because Kane believes the commander is lying under his breath, and he would not tolerate someone lying in front of the heir of Logis. With that, Ricardo wraps up the flashback. At that moment, Kane's escort knight speaks up. Since Ricardo isn't telling the full truth, he decides to explain it himself. According to him, Commander Scoven claims that Ghislaine, who never even trains, took down an orc with his bare hands and dealt with the traitorous escort knights all by himself. That's why Scoven got beaten up, which was meant to be a wake-up call for him for his lies. The knight smugly claims that none of this would have happened if Scoven hadn't lied in the first place. Ghislaine doesn't speak out loud, but in his thoughts, we learn how much he hates Cain. Apparently, Cain used to be his subordinate, and whenever he visited Perdium, he always caused a mess. Even after causing all that trouble, no one could say anything because he was basically one of the allies for House Perdium. No one ever looked down on Cain, unlike Ghislaine, who always had an inferiority complex. Cain's confidence and bold demeanor were praised as qualities befitting of an heir, which is why our boy was criticized more. Let's now turn our attention to Cain's perspective. This big jackass is amazed at how much patience Ghislaine is showing because usually he would have charged at him with this much provocation. We then flash back to a little while ago in Logis County. There, Cain got an order to kill Ghislaine. The one who gave him the order was the same hooded guy who had gotten a lot of slack from his leaders for failing his previous mission. The hooded guy promised Cain that if he succeeded in this task, the esteemed one would support the Logis family. Cain assured him that he could easily defeat Ghislaine since he was just a weak brat. But what bothered Cain was that Ghislaine was also an heir to this land, so he wasn't sure how he was going to eliminate him without complications. The hooded guy suggested they could lure Ghislaine into a duel, making it look like an unfortunate accident. It would simply appear as a trivial dispute between heirs. The hooded guy also promised to support Cain by disguising himself as an escort knight to orchestrate the situation so there would be no need for concern. The thought that he gets to kill his own cousin fascinates Cain, and the bastard agrees with this right away. In the present, Cain is thinking about why they want Ghislaine eliminated. He wonders if perhaps Ghislaine has changed a little, and that's the reason for the order. But in any case, Cain proceeds with the plan. In order to provoke Ghislaine, he calls out to him, asking why he's standing still. Since they're facing each other, he better make arrangements. Ghislaine has no clue what arrangements he's talking about. Cain reminds him that he's heard the festival has been interrupted, so why not liven up the mood and have an amazing time? He further reminds how they've always been in sync when it comes to things like this. Ghislaine doesn't react much, and cryptically asks if he's talking about alcohol. You see, this bastard always had Ghislaine prepare alcohol and women every time he came here. Ghislaine granted his request back then because he didn't want to get beaten up, but he's not going to comply with this bastard anymore. Because of Cain, he had to waste a lot of money, which is also why his father cut off his allowance. But it looks like Ghislaine has finally found the root cause of his money problems, and he's sure Cain is also the solution to this issue. Cain, on the other hand, keeps on demanding, telling him to bring the goods right now. Of course, Ghislaine plays along and tells Cain that he'll bring them right now, but first, he wants this bastard to repay the debts he owes. The hooded bastard can feel the aura and vibe Ghislaine is exuding. Even Cain gets serious and asks what debts he's talking about. Ghislaine just flashes a pleasant smile as he reminds him that he had been handling and arranging everything Cain asked of him with money, so now he wants that money back. At least 1,000 gold. Of course, the jackass is bewildered to hear such a ridiculous demand, because he believes that all of that should have cost no more than 100 gold. Besides, Cain always thought that Ghislaine did all of that because they were friends. It was like a friends with benefits situation. But well, Ghislaine wouldn't call their relationship friends, because he had been this bastard's doormat for the longest time. But now he wants this jackass to pay up if he values his life. He's in dire need of money, and he won't let this bastard get away without taking the dues. Silence fills the room, and even Ghislaine's knight, Ricardo, is sweating his balls from the bold declaration Ghislaine just made. The big guy furiously stands up, clearly enraged. He doesn't like the idea of Ghislaine getting too full of himself. He's sure that all the rumors Ghislaine is spreading about his deeds have gone to his head, which is why he's acting so bold now. To Cain, Ghislaine is still nothing but a parasite feeding off this land. So the bastard balls up his fist, ready to kill this leech once and for all. But even as the fist comes directly at Ghislaine, he doesn't even flinch, let alone move. And before the punch can connect, he just tilts his body slightly and lets the punch slide harmlessly past him. The whole scene is nothing short of shocking. Cain swings again in full fury, but Ghislaine ducks down and delivers a sharp, open-handed punch straight into the big guy's belly. The force of the punch is so intense that it nearly causes Cain to cough up blood. Our boy attempts to retaliate with another swing, but Cain stops him mid-motion. Even though Cain does not take any damage, he still pretends as if he in pain. The hooded figure rushes over, asking Cain if he's all right, but it's clear that the massive man is far from fine. His pride, the only thing larger than his body, is now shattered. Ghislaine nonchalantly tells him to stop whining, because that punch did not do any damage. But Cain keeps on pretending as if he is suffering. The onlookers in the pub are left speechless, unable to process what they just witnessed. Ghislaine, the so-called weak heir, just took down Cain Logis with barely any effort, and the entire room is unsure of what to think. My guy can obviously tell that this bastard is pretending, and he can clearly tell what Cain is trying to achieve by doing this. The big bastard then quickly turns to his hooded knight, asking if he liked the acting. Of course, the hooded bastard gives him props for the stellar performance. Kane has set the stage perfectly to make it look like the fault lies with Ghislain in everyone's eyes. So this should be more than enough to justify a duel. Kane is more than ready to seize this opportunity, because helping the big shots to eradicate Ghislain means he'll have backing from those in authority, and he must want the support of those above him. Not only that, it'll also help him cut off the Perdium household. So he plays along, pulls out the glove, and with some verbal foreplay, he sets the scene to demand a duel. But before this bastard can throw the glove in our boy's face, my guy acts first and throws the glove at this jackass's face, challenging him to the duel. Since Kane insulted the heir of Perdium in front of everyone and assaulted his knight, my guy demands to have a duel. Silence falls over this big jackass's face, but that straight face quickly shifts into a smirk, because he thinks Ghislain has dug his own grave by demanding the duel. So, it goes without saying that he accepts the duel. On the other hand, the sassy smile stays plastered on our boy's face as he calls out to his knight, Ricardo, and tells him to bring all the merchants protesting in front of the castle. He wants them to know that Ghislain, the young master of the Perdium house, is about to make them some fat cash. You see, the festival was suddenly cancelled, and the atmosphere, which had heated up to its peak, suddenly cooled down. This left behind a bunch of tourists who couldn't leave out of regret. They're probably in a state of incomplete combustion, not able to spend their money or time. In such a situation, if an event were to take place to soothe them, everyone would be over the moon. And so, as my guy stands in the ring against that bastard, the crowd is going absolutely bonkers with cheers. People are gathering from far-off places, and the merchants in the market are finally able to make some cash out of the tourists. That fat merchant who was at the front of the line during the protest has set up his table for people to bet on their respective players. Many of them simply put their money on Master Kane, which is understandable because they think it's the safest bet. The big bastard is also ready with his giant sword to start the duel, but he's kind of annoyed that Ghislain has turned a serious duel into a marketplace like this. He makes one thing clear before starting. His sword won't stop even if our boy surrenders. Ghislain isn't terrified or surprised to hear this, since he can tell the bastard's motive is to kill. Anyhow, since it seems like they have enough people gathered, Ghislain decides to officially start the duel. That's when the hooded bastard butts in and states that the proper bet can't proceed at this rate. Everyone is confused about what this hooded guy means, so the fat merchant explains that nobody has bet their money on young Master Ghislain. The crowd starts to murmur among themselves, believing the result is already pretty obvious, and that Ghislain doesn't stand a chance. Kane finds it amusing to think that even the marketplace doesn't want to be associated with Ghislain in any way. Since the bet isn't balanced, they decide to change the criteria of the bet to make it somewhat fair. But that's when Commander Scoven brings out a bag full of cash and bets it on young Master Ghislain. Not only that, Lady Elena also fetches a bag full of money to bet on her brother. Everyone wasn't surprised when Commander Scoven showed up, but seeing Elena herself, even our boy is a bit bewildered, as are the people in the crowd. She then asks the merchant if this much money is enough for the bet, and the fat merchant humbly says yes. Now that there are people betting on Ghislain, Kane decides to start the duel without wasting any more time, though he looks a bit annoyed by the turn of events. Anyway, the duel begins, and our boy gives Kane the chance to attack first. After all, Kane is younger, so as a big brother, Ghislain would love to give his little brother the first chance to strike. This cheap copy of Hulk is bewildered to hear this, but my guy just swings his sword as he unsheathes it and confidently challenges Kane to come at him. Silence falls over the big bastard's face, and it looks like he's taken the bait. He gets into stance and leaps forward like a giant bull and comes crashing down with his massive sword. The swords of both contestants collide, and this cheap Hulk pours every ounce of power into the clash. But nothing much happens to our boy. So the bastard once again swings his sword without thinking, and once again, my guy dodges. The fatty then leaps into the air to kick, but once again his effort is effortlessly dodged by Ghislain. After that little back and forth exchange of blows, both contestants fall back. While this creepy sucker smiles with his equally creepy grin, my guy can see how full of himself Kane is feeling. Belinda is sweating after seeing the young master clash like this with that behemoth. She even urges the young lady to stop her brother. Meanwhile, the hooded guy feels really confident that Ghislain is as good as dead. He believes that the moment our hero decided to cross swords with Kane, he fell for the trap. He's sure that Ghislain will be overwhelmed by Kane's immense power and will become consumed by the thought that there's no chance to counterattack. He will end up using all their energy just on evasion. In the end, the exhausted Ghislain will leave an opening and eventually meet his end. This is how Kane has won countless battles. His strength is unmatched, but my guy is just as much a match for this bastard with his agility, dodging each and every attack effortlessly. Even Kane is forced to admit that Ghislain is quite the slippery guy, and it seems his skills have indeed grown since before. So, the bastard cranks up his strength even more. He literally grabs his sword by the sharp side with his bare hands and tries to hit Ghislain with it full force. Although our boy manages to evade the direct hit by using his own sword, he gets stuck in the sword's crossguard. Cain, with all his might, swings our boy into the sky. Everyone is left with their jaws hanging when they see the young master in the air, and the only guy who's excited is the hooded bastard, who's sure that Ghislain is done for. But it looks like this hooded guy is about to get his expectations subverted. While Ghislain is mid-air, he quickly channels mana into his legs. After gaining his balance, he lands perfectly on the ground. At first my guy was just going easy on the bastard, but since this shithead has crossed the line, he's ready to teach him a lesson. He dashes at this bastard with godly speed and zips past him. The hooded guy is completely dumbfounded to see that this guy safely landed back by condensing mana into his legs. Ghislain, on the other hand, calls this cheap hulk an ignorant swordsman. He believes that this sucker must have thought he was the strongest, just because the opponent would get scared if he showed a little bit of his strength. But my guy is ready to open this bastard's eyes by making him realize that brute force is not everything. The fatty feels mocked, so being the brute he is, he charges at our boy once again, asking how he's going to do that. That's when my guy takes a firm grip on the ground, and after kicking over the hilt of the sword, he quickly leaps into the air and lands multiple strikes on this gorilla. But the gorilla retaliates with his own sword. Ghislain quickly sidesteps and then steps right over the sword itself. Once the bastard is momentarily rendered weaponless, Ghislain takes his chance and swings his sword, and lands a hit. After that deadly dance of the blade, my guy dramatically stops, and the bastard starts to leak from every place he was hit by Ghislain's sword. All the spectators are left in awe, and people suddenly erupt in disbelief when they finally realize that our boy has indeed improved a lot. They start to panic if he's actually going to win the battle. Meanwhile, Elena is feeling proud as she confidently reminds Belinda that she was scared for no reason. Commander Scoven is equally proud to see our boy's stellar performance. But the only person sweating his balls is this shithead in the hoodie. He can clearly see that the wounds are shallow, even though our boy could have easily made them deeper if he had wanted. This makes him believe that Ghislain didn't deliver a deep wound on purpose. The fatty, on the other hand, is feeling mocked to see such godlike swordsmanship from our hero. Ghislain then turns his attention to the defeated bastard and throws his sword away because he intends to fight without a sword. You see, he believes that the skill gap is too wide to warrant further weapon use, so he'll fight barehanded from now on. This much humiliation is enough to boil the fatty's blood. Ghislain is ready to take this opportunity to teach Cain a hard lesson, and he plans to drill those lessons with his bare knuckles. Ghislain believes that this small-brained, big-bodied idiot is no match for him in swordsmanship, so he decides to take a handicap and fight barehanded, a style in which the fatty excels. This time, my guy wants to bet 2,000 more gold, which is twice the amount he had initially demanded from Cain. The crowd is unsettled to hear the mention of 2,000 gold and a barehanded fight, even though it was supposed to be a duel. Let's not forget about this hoodie bastard. He can barely control the sweat dripping from his face. To think that our boy dares to challenge Cain to a barehanded fight. He literally never thought he'd see this day. Though somewhere in the back of his mind, he thinks there's still a chance for Cain to win after all. The fat merchant quickly tells everyone to place their additional bets, announcing that the event is now a barehanded fight between young Lord Ghislain and young Master Cain. This time, many people are betting on our boy, as their opinions are starting to shift. They realize that sheer force isn't always the winning factor, and for that reason, they're putting their money on Ghislain. The cheap hulk is still full of himself, but he nonetheless accepts Ghislain's challenge. However, he refuses to let go of his sword and decides to use it against our boy. Belinda, panicking at this unexpected turn of events, quickly urges the young master to pick up his sword as well. But the big bastard has already started to swing his sword down, while my guy stays as cool as a cucumber, ready to knock some sense into this brute. As soon as that sword comes crashing down, Ghislain ducks, moving so fast that his silhouette seems to lag behind. He delivers a crushing blow to the sucker's overgrown leg, following it with a devastating uppercut under the chin. The bastard's face is left leaking blood. That one punch was enough to scramble his brain, and one of his knees hits the ground. This was unreal. Cain didn't even see those punches coming. The audience is just as surprised as everyone else, thoroughly enjoying this unexpected turn of events. Meanwhile, Ghislain exudes confidence and charisma, claiming he hasn't even started yet and wants to play some more. This bruises the fatty's fragile ego, making his jaw clench as he rushes at our boy once again. But my guy just keeps dodging left and right effortlessly. The choreography of this fight scene is insane. Even as the narrator, I can't keep up with all those godly movements. No matter what the fatty tries, every move gets countered and overpowered. In return, he's met with one crushing blow after another. As Cain reflects on his situation, he remembers how Ghislain used to avoid looking him in the eye, always bowing down whenever Cain showed up. But now, everything has changed. The fatty keeps taking hits, an endless barrage of blows from our hero. He's playing the perfect role of a punching bag. At one point, his entire body is covered in bruises. His face is so banged up that even his own mother would refuse to recognize him as her son. Ghislaine grabs the bastard by the hair, and as he looks at this stubborn fatty, he feels genuine pity for his family. Count Logos had supported the Perdium house relentlessly, even when it was on the verge of collapse, simply because he was a close friend of our boy's father. However, Ghislaine can tell that Cain is nothing like his father. The scene transitions to a few years ago, where we hear Cain shouting at his father for being overly supportive of the Perdium house. Cain is annoyed, arguing that his father is wasting resources by continuously investing in a land that's withering away. It hasn't even been a week since Logos returned home, but he's already preparing to head back to help Perdium. Cain begs his father not to go, visibly frustrated by what he perceives as his father's blind loyalty. But his father politely yet sincerely responds that he's doing all of this because they are friends, and there's no other reason than that. In the present, seeing this fatty, Ghislaine balls up his fist. But surprisingly, this isn't a punch meant to obliterate the fatty's face. It's actually a hand of friendship extended from our boy. This hand of friendship is something none of us expected. And what's even more unexpected is that Cain warms up to this gesture and admits defeat. Everyone is left absolutely awestruck to see Cain admit his defeat, and the referee promptly announces Ghislaine as the winner. Everyone from House Perdium is fascinated to see the young master win, while Elena is quite happy and overjoyed to see her brother finally bag the victory. That's when the hooded guy rushes toward the defeated Cain and starts berating him. He asks how Cain could admit defeat so early just because he was at a slight disadvantage. Cain doesn't respond. He simply turns his head away, stating that he's not playing that game anymore. Since Cain has failed to take down Ghislaine, the hooded guy is not sure how he is going to face his seniors. Right at that moment, our boy also pops up in the scene and decides to play a little dirty with this sucker. The hooded guy has no clue what Ghislaine is even thinking. But we soon get to know when our boy shouts at the top of his lungs that this man here is volunteering to pay for all the meat and drinks for everyone gathered here. While the hooded bastard is losing his mind, the crowd erupts in pure happiness at the thought of getting meat and drinks for free. The hooded guy quickly argues back, telling Ghislaine that he never agreed to any of this and demands that he withdraw his statement. But my guy simply places a reassuring hand on this bastard's shoulder and lets him know that this is the price for losing the duel. And just to be clear, it won't be deducted from the bet. He tells him to remember to add 2,000 gold to the original bet of 1,000 gold. And if he tries to run, the consequences will be severe. When Ghislaine says this, he means every word of it. The menacing picture of our boy quickly burns into the bastard's eyes. Later, the next day, in Ghislaine's room, we find Ghislaine staring at a treasure chest full of glittering gold coins. The amount of money he has is actually pretty huge. To give you an idea of how much it is, you could easily hire a small mercenary corps with this amount of money. But it takes a lot of time to grow money, and those bastards who want him killed won't wait for his forces to grow. So he only has a limited amount of time to execute the business plan he has in mind. That's when Belinda and his sister come up to him with satisfied smiles on their faces. The way they're looking at him feels like they have some ulterior motive hidden behind their smiles. He quickly questions why they're here, to which his little sister politely asks where he plans to spend all this money. Of course, Ghislaine catches on to what she's implying, so he directly asks her if she wants some. To which the lady responds that she's just asking. Belinda then speaks up, stating that she has a pretty good idea of where he's going to spend it all. She is sure that since Lady Amelia's birthday is coming up soon, Ghislaine must be planning to put on a grand show to buy his fiancée an expensive present. But we all know that our boy isn't thinking about this at all. However, the mention of a fiancé catches Ghislaine completely off guard. He literally does not even remember if he even has fiancé. The maid laughs softly, thinking he must be feeling shy. They know he's pretending to be clueless because he's embarrassed that they figured him out. Still, since Elena is noticing that her brother is quite absent-minded lately, she decides to remind him that they're talking about Amelia of Rayfold County. Finally, the name triggers some memories in Ghislaine's mind, but they're not exactly fond ones. You see, Amelia Rayfold is renowned as a noble among nobles. Known for her kind nature and selfless actions, she's deeply admired in her territory, garnering the unwavering support of her people regardless of their social status. But Ghislaine knows another side of this story. In his mind, she isn't a celebrated noblewoman but a traitor. Why? Because Amelia Rayfold, who once stood as a shining beacon of nobility, would later incite rebellion. She would become infamously known as the Witch of the North, aligning herself with the Delphine Duchy to deliver the final blow to Perdium's downfall. To Ghislaine, she is no gentle fiancée, but the very woman who betrayed everything his family stood for. He then asks Belinda when his father will return, to which she responds with uncertainty, saying probably in a week. This is good enough for Ghislaine. With a full week ahead of him, he decides to take a trip to Rayfold County. Belinda isn't sure why he's leaving already since it's not even her birthday yet, but my guy says he's going to get some money from them. Later, we finally see the lady in question, Amelia Rayfold. At first glance, she looks dead-eyed, but I can't take my eyes off her major assets. Nonetheless, she's in this town, where she's offering a poor little girl a pair of sandals. Amelia is apparently offering her own sandals, so the little girl isn't sure whether to take them or not. But Amelia assures the hesitant girl that if anyone has to walk barefoot on her land, it should be her. She then commands her soldiers to provide food and shelter for them right away, and the soldiers quickly jump into action. As she walks away with her entourage of soldiers, all the civilians echo their gratitude. Later, we arrive at Rayfold County, in Amelia's garden, where we see this guy washing her feet with such dedication that you might feel jealous of. He's really proud of the great job she's done. This guy is actually Amelia's escort knight, Bernaf. Amelia responds to him that her father had always demanded absolute obedience from the people of his territory, but the common folk will always follow the one who keeps them warm and well-fed. The guy then says that with this, she has won the people's hearts, and that it will definitely prove favorable in her future successor competition. But it looks like Amelia is not on the same wavelength as him, so she quickly puts her feet right over his face like a sadistic bitch. She questions him about what happened in the duel against the finest sword of the North, to which the guy apologizes, saying he lost intentionally to avoid unnecessary attention. If he had stood victorious, people might have started paying attention to her, and it's not yet the time for her to reveal her hidden claws. He then kisses her feet passionately while expressing his full support and loyalty to her. But the lady believes that this is how it should be since she has invested so much to raise him, and she definitely would never allow him to be a weakling. She then starts questioning him about the merchants. The knight assures her there is nothing to worry about with the Arctium Merchant Guild. All the materials used for the reconstruction of the Forest of Beasts outpost, which was recently half destroyed by the orc attack in Perdium, are being purchased through their merchant guild. In essence, her merchants are recouping all the support funds that Count Rayfold sends to Perdium each year. Moreover, he is recruiting all the soldiers and knights who are leaving Perdium. Many of those soldiers are great knights who are well trained from battles against barbarian tribes. Basically, her plan to squeeze everything out from Perdium is a total success so far. The lady is glad to hear this, and, as she said before, she tells him to maintain the appearance of an ordinary merchant guild and be thorough, because she cannot let their true identity be exposed until they have fully built up their strength. That's when her butler arrives. The knight is annoyed to see the butler entering the garden without permission, but the butler quickly delivers urgent news he received from the castle gate. Apparently, young Lord Ghislain Perdium has come to visit. Although we were told he is her fiancé, she definitely doesn't look even a little happy at the mention of his name. She questions the butler about the reason for his visit, and the butler gets all sweaty when he reveals that Ghislain is here to discuss the merchant guild. Both the lady and her knight, Bernaf, are wide-eyed upon hearing this. We then arrive in the visitor's room, where we find her sitting in front of our boy. My guy sits as casually as he can and greets her in the same laid-back tone. But the lady responds with a contemptuous expression to his greeting. She's clearly annoyed that he came here without prior notification, leading her to believe he still hasn't learned proper etiquette. My guy reminds her that since it's her birthday soon, he thought he'd give her a gift in advance. He places a flower on the table and explains that he picked it up from a merchant guild nearby. He mentions the fragrance is quite nice and that he plans to buy flowers from there from now on. If his memory serves him right, the merchant guild is called Arctium. Of course, the lady immediately knows where he's going with the conversation, but she plays clueless and says she isn't sure what he's trying to imply. Now that she's received his gift, she claims she'll take her leave and begins to walk away. But that's when my guy calls her name. With a serious look on his face, he tells her to sit down. The girl instantly picks on the pressure Ghislain is exuding. What bothers her the most is how such ominous pressure could be coming from a guy who used to squirm and barely speak whenever he stood in front of her. My guy then decides to get straight to the point and demands money, around 10,000 gold coins. Not surprisingly, she's not vibing with the idea of him showing up out of nowhere and asking for such a large sum from his fiancée. She wonders if he's here on behalf of his father, but Ghislain clarifies that his father has nothing to do with this. Besides, he already knows that she is not planning to marry with him anyway. He is sure that she might become the lord of this land given her preparations. He indirectly threatens her that if word about her secretly building power spreads in Rayfold, she might lose the succession fight. This makes her quite angry, of course. With some death glares, she tells him not to even joke about something like that, not even as a joke. To which my guy assures her that he will keep her secret for now, but of course he might not keep his word if he leaves this room empty-handed. But the lady remains sassy with her words because she has already figured out how to deal with Ghislain. She quickly calls out to her knight, Bernaf, and that feet licker promptly walks inside. The knight doesn't forget his manners and promptly greets Lord Ghislain. Meanwhile, When we peek into Gislin's mind, we learn that this guy has always stayed by Amelia's side, and he's a skilled individual with the potential to be compared to the finest sword of the North at the time. Our boy quickly reminds the lady that if she tries to kill him here, a war might break out. He questions whether she really has the time to be fighting wars when the succession ceremony is so close. But Amelia has already thought it through. She has the perfect alibi. A sudden ruffian barged in, caused chaos, and was killed by her escort knight. That's the story the world will hear about his demise. With that plan in mind, she doesn't hesitate before ordering her knight to kill this brat. The feet licker is more than happy to comply with her command, and quickly unsheathes his sword. But my guy isn't about to take any crap either. If that's how she wants to play it, then he has no choice but to get a little serious as well. The stage is set for yet another godly duel between two skilled individuals, so grab your parrots and brace yourself for what's coming next. But, well, as much as we wish to see a manly fight between two warriors, this piece of shit knight has some other plans. Suddenly, Ghislaine notices some rustling behind him, and before he can react, an assassin pops out from the empty armor and thrusts a sword directly into the sofa in an attempt to pierce our boy along with it. But this bastard was too slow, and my guy just rolls to the ground, kicks the bastard hard, and throws him out of the window. The lady and that sucker stand in disbelief because they didn't expect our boy to react with such finesse. Ghislaine expresses his disgust at this bitch for feigning politeness while launching a surprise attack. He then quickly lunges toward the knight, and they both engage in a sword fight. My guy questions this shit of a knight, asking if Rayfold doesn't know the way of chivalry. The knight apologizes but reminds our boy that he was the one who was rude by arriving unannounced and unsettling the lady with his shallow threats. The two go toe-to-toe, trying their best to tag the other with their sword first, but it looks like my guy has the upper hand with his ninja-like reflexes. He even manages to push this bastard back with a single kick. This knight definitely didn't think much of our boy, assuming he was all talk with no real skill to back it up. But now, he's learning the hard way that our boy is no rookie at all. Amelia, on the other hand, is losing her temper watching her knight get overpowered by this brat. She menacingly demands that he finish the fight quickly and bring her this bastard's head if he really considers himself her knight. The feet licker decides to get a little more serious because this is now a matter of his mistress's honor, and he doesn't want to disappoint her. He boldly tells our boy to come at him. My guy keeps that sassy smirk on his face, mocking how an escort knight dares to order him around like that. But now that this knight is asking for it, Ghislaine is more than ready to give this bastard exactly what he's asking for. The two once again engage in a deadly dance of swords, but this time, the knight isn't holding back a single bit. He even manages to graze Ghislaine's face with a nasty cut. Both of them are moving so fast it's hard to follow their movements. All they leave behind are silhouettes of themselves. Amelia, on the other hand, is growing more frustrated and restless watching Ghislaine fight like this. She can't believe how a guy who was once called a lousy punk is now fighting her knight, Bernaf, on equal footing. The fight itself is incredibly intense, and if you blink, you miss it. Both fighters are too fast. When our boy tries to tag this bastard, he dodges, and when this bastard tries to tag our boy, he dodges. This back and forth continues relentlessly. Ghislaine then tries to use the same attack he did before, but this time he gets slammed hard onto the ground. While he's caught off guard, the knight charges at him with his sword in hand, but Ghislaine quickly reacts, pulling off a series of acrobatic moves before landing back on his feet. By now, Ghislaine has figured out that this dude is enduring attacks by using mana. On the other hand, the knight is also forced to admit that Ghislaine is quite different from what they've heard about him. The way he wields his sword doesn't look like something systematically taught. It seems more like he picked it up through real combat experience. The knight asks if Ghislaine has perhaps fought with barbarians so often that he naturally adopted their style. He believes that such a method might work in a chaotic battlefield, but claims it won't work against him. This time the knight vows to end this. Ghislaine also knows that this is not proving to be easy. The narrow, precise thrusts of the blade constantly targeting his head can mess with sense of distance and timing. And at close range, the difference in opponent's size makes it hard to overpower this bastard with technique alone. In the first place, this knight wasn't an opponent Ghislaine should have tried to take on yet. It's basically like trying to defeat a final boss with level 1 gear. But, well, Ghislaine didn't have much time to prepare for all that, so he decides to take the fight up a notch. He conjures up a mana string, which zips past the knight's ear. Before the knight can even figure out what's going on, my guy pulls a sword from behind, knocking the bastard hard at the back of his head. Then Ghislaine follows up with a kick to the knight's face. Bernaf momentarily loses his senses after getting hit twice on his head, leaving the spider lady in disbelief. My guy then leaps into the air and comes crashing down, but the knight quickly throws him away with a powerful push of his body force. Bernaf swiftly tells his mistress to get out of here because he can no longer guarantee her safety at this rate. And from this point onward, he vows to give it his all, warning her that she might get caught in the collateral damage. Ghislaine is also fired up for this fight because he hasn't faced such an entertaining opponent in a long time. Meanwhile, Amelia is running down the corridor with her cat for her life. She looks visibly distressed because how dare our boy cause her such humiliation. She has no clue who could be the idiot who leaked information about the Merchant Guild to Ghislaine. There's no way he would know about it in such detail, at least not without help. The rumors about him about slaying orcs, protecting his younger sister from assassins, and even defeating the heir of Logius, judging by that rascal's past, she had thought it must have been either luck or exaggerated information. But now she is forced to believe that he might really have improved. She then notices that all of the guards are missing, which annoys her further. But she soon finds all the soldiers scattered on the ground, and the one who took them down is none other than Belinda. Amelia is startled to see Perdium's maid, and before she can react further, Belinda places a dagger right over her throat. That's when Belinda notices the spider hanging over her face. She grabs the little critter in her hands and expresses her dislike about this shit. Belinda then reminds this bastard of a lady that she remembers the day of the engagement ceremony, where she eavesdropped on the conversation between Count Rayfold and the Lord of Perdium. She apparently overheard that all of Amelia's siblings picked on her for having creepy spiders around her, so she raised the spiders herself and took her revenge. Belinda isn't sure if that action was perhaps an attempt to overcome trauma or a display of self-assertion. Belinda then apologizes if this might come off as harsh, but she reminds Amelia that it doesn't suit her. With that, she crushes the spider under her feet. After crushing the spider brutally, Belinda requests that this bitch cooperate with her a little. But before we can learn what kind of request Belinda wants to make, we're back to the fight between the boys, and it looks like the knight has started to exude some serious ominous power already. The air has gotten rough, and the overwhelming amount of mana is really making our boy quite concerned. The knight is really pissed that our boy isn't taking him seriously and had called him an entertaining opponent previously, because that sounds almost like something a lowly mercenary would say. He despises the very idea that someone as lowly and non-serious as our boy dares to call himself a noble and tries to stand on equal status as Amelia. Well, of course, our boy is a noble, and he doesn't think this is something a mere escort knight like himself should say. Bernaf takes his first step, and they start clashing their swords. He is absolutely livid because he thinks Ghislaine is mocking the nobility. He continues to throw one blow after another. My guy is amazed that this bastard is moving forward with such strength and fierceness. But Ghislaine has also had enough. He responds with equally aggressive swordsmanship. This time the knight is definitely not messing around. With a single swing, he pushes our boy backwards, then quickly follows up with another blow to land a critical hit. The time freezes as the final blow from that bastard is deployed, and blood splatters as the blade grazes the shoulder of our boy. Bernaf, on the other hand, is absolutely boggled out of his mind that this bastard braced himself for the injury and used his shoulder to push away the blade. Our boy then quickly retaliates, pushing the absurd knight backward a little. But Bernaf quickly delivers a kick to our boy while mocking him, saying this is the difference between him and a brat who wields his blade for entertainment. The kick sends Ghislaine flying backwards, but it still isn't enough to take him down. He still finds this whole situation quite entertaining. With overwhelming speed, range, and consecutive attacks, the knight controls the flow of the fight. Any attempt to counter him in close quarters through grappling is instantly shut down. In a locked clash, it seems like their swords are bound together, making the knight believe they can't be separated. With Ghislaine's current mana, he can't counter the knight's strength, but he's playing a long game, knowing that the knight has still yet to see the ace our boy has up his sleeve, which is Ghislaine's unique mana cultivation technique. In an instant, Ghislaine unleashes his third core and shifts the balance of the fight. One powerful strike is enough to knock the sword out of the knight's hand, leaving him bewildered. The only thing in Bernaf's mind is how this guy wields such explosive mana during combat. With Bernaf now defenseless, Ghislaine places his sword over the knight's head, freezing him completely. At that moment, Belinda drags Amelia into the scene as well. The once cocky lady is literally in tears, and quickly agrees to give the 10,000 gold, urging them to simply vanish from her sight afterward. While Ghislaine is glad to have gotten what he came for, he's also irritated that it had to come to this. It would have been so much easier if she had just agreed earlier. Anyhow, he withdraws his sword and walks toward Amelia to deliver some bad news. The fee just went up to 20,000 gold. In the aftermath, Amelia's entire palace is in shambles. She's throwing stuff around out of frustration. Not only did her knight lose, but now she has to fork over 20,000 gold. The knight tries to apologize, admitting that Ghislaine turned out to be a much stronger individual than the rumors suggested. He owns up to his mistake, saying it's his fault for not assessing him properly beforehand. Ghislaine had emitted mana surpassing that of an advanced level knight. Amelia is clearly not thrilled to hear this. When Bernaf asks if she wants to report this to the Delphine Duchy, she slaps him across the face. She grabs him by the collar, furious because what he says isn't practical. Seems like she is terrified of Duke Delphine, because if he finds out about today's incident, she knows she's done for. The reason she is secretly allied with Duke Delphine without her father's knowledge is because of a covert agreement she had with Duke. He promises to support her rebellion, and she is supposed to help him by bringing down Perdium. If this alliance is exposed, it's certain her siblings will kill her. If our boy knows about the secret of the Merchant Guild, then Amelia is sure he might also know about her agreement with the Duke as well. She knows he has to be stopped, so she must do whatever it takes to take down that bastard. The knight acknowledges this. She then asks him how Ghislaine's body is, to which he shares that he managed to inflict light injuries on many parts of his body, with a heavy one on his shoulder. Not only that, but because Ghislaine spent an explosive amount of mana, he won't be in the best condition for some time. Since they are thinking of getting rid of him without leaving any trace, they cannot use knights from their land. Amelia had already figured that much, which is why she had some extra knights trained for these kinds of situations. It seems even Bernaf doesn't know about these knights, so she reminds him about the wild cats. This group apparently consists of war orphans, those without kings, and those without status. Only the most talented, natural-born specialists are among them, known as the wild cat traffickers. She tells her knight to go to the location she marks on the map and assemble a dozen or so of them, only those who are proficient with mana. The choice of location for troop deployment makes sense to Bernaf. You see, that ravine is the only narrow path from the Rayfold territory to Perdium. It's an ideal place to quietly handle things, since the area is remote and the terrain is tight. Bernaf decides to get started on the plan right away. This time, Amelia is absolutely determined to make our boy pay for the humiliation he has caused her. Meanwhile, Ghislaine has already left Amelia's palace. Inside his carriage, he carefully wraps his injured body with bandages. We also see Old Man Fergus and Belinda are accompanying him. They ask if he's all right, and he assures them there's nothing to worry about. The cuts aren't too deep, and it's not that bad considering he had pushed himself to its best. Ghislaine is just relieved that the 20,000 gold he received from Amelia is enough to cover the base funds needed to rebuild their territory. That amount of money is like saving a few years' worth of effort. Of course, it would have been great if he could have killed Amelia too, but doing so would have made war unavoidable. He can't risk the safety of his territory just because of a momentary whim. Perdium is already struggling to deal with the barbarians, so it's wiser to withdraw quietly without stirring up more trouble. The fact that he knows the secret of the Arctium Merchant Guild is already enough to put a burden on Amelia. Belinda watches him with concerned eyes and asks if everything is going according to his plan. She remembers that he had instructed her to subdue the guards once she heard fighting noises inside, and he also told her to take Lady Amelia hostage once she came out of the room. Ghislaine confirms that's exactly what he said. Right at that moment, he feels a sharp pain and coughs up some blood. It's actually the recoil from opening up his third core, though his condition is still much better than last time. Still, it would be troublesome to go through this every time he decides to use his power. He needs to find a way to increase his mana quickly. Belinda quickly grabs his hand, noticing that the flow in his body is completely messed up. She grabs a needle and starts piercing it into the back of his hand with godly speed. Ghislaine finds it surprisingly therapeutic. Once she finishes, he exhales a cloud of smoke from his lungs and feels a sense of relief. He can feel that his tangled mana road has opened up a bit. What's even more mind-blowing is that the method she used on him isn't something you can do without a deep understanding of mana. It's understandable that Belinda can do this, considering it was his mother who brought her into the palace. But the question still remains, who exactly is she? Ghislaine has no clue why such a skilled individual is working as a headmaid in the countryside, but it's good to have as many skilled people as possible in his land. After all, the enemies he's encountered so far are just the beginning. That's when Belinda speaks up, assuring him that she'll help with anything because she trusts him unconditionally. But he better tell her why he took such a huge amount of money from Lady Amelia. Ghislaine states that he needed to spend the money, and since Amelia is the only rich person he knows, he decided to extort her. Both of his subordinates are bewildered to hear this. They find it odd that he literally broke the engagement just for the money. And because of this, he'll be in trouble once Count Rayfold finds out. This makes Ghislaine break into a smile, and he rhetorically asks her if she actually trusts him. Belinda barely contains her annoyance at him asking the same question again, even though she just confirmed it. Since she trusts him, she's sure he'll at least tell her what he plans to do with the money. Ghislaine answers with one word, the forest of beasts. That single sentence leaves her silent and shocked. Our boy, on the other hand, goes on to reveal that he's going to use it to pioneer the forest of beasts. The old man, Fergus, nearly jumps out of his skin at this, and reminds Ghislaine that development has been attempted there ever since his great-grandfather's time, but there hasn't been much progress. Ghislaine reminds the old man of the request he made. The old man quickly understands what Ghislaine is referring to, but hesitates before responding. Eventually, he admits that the person Ghislaine asked him to find is indeed at the location he mentioned. However, the old man is not sure if they even visit that person. But Ghislaine has already made up his mind to meet him at any cost. Belinda, however, objects, stating that they need to return home for now. She argues that in his current condition, Ghislaine shouldn't be wandering around. Despite her protests, Ghislaine points out the reality of their situation. He questions whether Amelia would let them leave so easily after everything they've done to her. Knowing her personality, he is certain she will try to kill him to silence him, ensuring her secret about her alliance with Duke Delphine is never revealed. Belinda tries to flex her scrawny muscles, confidently assuring her young master that she can easily take down anyone who comes their way. Not to mention, they also have the old man Fergus as their knight. Though Ghislaine has no doubt that Belinda is a reliable person, he knows that's not her role. What he needs is a vanguard, and they're on their way to meet him. Later, they arrive at this place with just one shack in sight. The carriage driver knocks on the door, but there's no response. It's almost as if the house is abandoned. But Fergus points out that this is the address they're looking for. Finally, someone answers the door. Out comes this guy with a face fully covered in facial hair. He immediately questions the identity of the visitors. While everyone is a bit freaked out by this unusual man, my guy shows no expression at all. Belinda even asks him if this is really the person they've been searching for, because she doesn't think this guy looks like he could fight, let alone survive what's coming tomorrow. But Ghislaine confidently assures her that this is the man they're looking for. The old man stares at the young master and bluntly tells him to stop wasting his time and leave. That's when my guy addresses him by his real title, the ex-captain of the Ratatosk mercenaries, Jillian. The old man perks up at the mention of his title. When he turns back to look, Ghislaine warmly extends his hand, inviting him to join them. Both the old man and the carriage driver are shocked to hear the mention of the Ratatosk mercenaries. Here's the thing. The Ratatosk mercenaries were a legendary group that only master warriors skilled with most weapons could join. Though they no longer exist, their reputation is so strong that knights from even distant lands have heard their name at least once. And the captain of that legendary group is Jillian. That's the man Ghislaine has come all this way to meet. The old man throws his axe with full force, but my guy just tilts his head slightly, and the axe zips past him. Everyone else immediately goes on high alert. They quickly surround their young master and take fighting stances, ready for whatever comes next. But Jillian is all business. He's not here to waste time. He bluntly asks Ghislaine the reason for his visit. Belinda steps in front of our guy, believing this man is a complete nutcase. But Ghislaine keeps it short. He only says one thing, the eternal punishment, and further claims he knows the cure to the incurable illness his daughter is suffering from. Well, that's enough to pique Jillian's interest. Apparently, his daughter's condition causes her high fever, frequent coughing up of blood, and red spots blooming like flower petals on her skin. The sight of her pain, similar to a prisoner enduring punishment, gave this incurable disease its name, eternal punishment. Finally, we see the girl in question. She screams at the top of her lungs in pain, and the mercenary rushes inside the shack to tend to his daughter, Rachel. Ghislaine can see that it's not too late for her. In his previous life, our boy had tried to find Jillian to recruit him, but the man had taken his own life shortly after his daughter passed away. Judging by the state of this house, it's clear that all of Jillian's assets must have been spent on her treatment. Now, all that remains are his weapons. The poor girl cries out, pleading with her father, saying she's in pain and can't bear it anymore. Seeing her suffer, Ghislaine decides to act quickly. He quickly tells Jillian that he's going to start the treatment right away, but Belinda immediately steps in to stop him before he can go any further. She doesn't understand what he thinks he's trying to do, but she knows this isn't something strength alone can solve. This disease is so severe that even priests have failed to cure it, and they called it a punishment from the gods for a reason. She doubts there's anything he can do, but my guy just yanks her hand off his shoulder and makes it clear he can fix her. He reminds Belinda that since she claimed to trust him, she'd better stick to her words. With that, it seems Belinda has no room left to argue. He then hands her a paper listing all the medicinal herbs they'll need and tells her to come back with them. When she reads the ingredients, she's stunned for a moment. The reason my guy knows all this is because, for wandering mercenaries without a home, knowledge is directly tied to survival. You see, eternal punishment might be incurable right now, but a cure will be discovered in the future. Back then, it became quite a hot topic, especially because the method was relatively simple. Thanks to that, my guy remembers it clearly. The only problem is that the exorbitant cost of the ingredients, and one of them is a rare herb called Fairy's Blessing. Now that he has the Fairy's Blessing and the other herbs, he carefully chops them, packs them tightly into a bottle, and pours distilled alcohol over the mixture. He shakes it thoroughly to blend everything and lets it sit for a while. Once ready, he adds the remaining ingredients, stirs them together, and prepares the potion. With that, the remedy is complete. He presents it to Jillian and instructs him to have his daughter drink it. Since Jillian has no reason to refuse, he quickly pours the medicine into his daughter's mouth. The moment it reaches her stomach, the effects begin to take hold. Her bruised red body starts returning to normal, leaving everyone speechless. It's just unbelievable. No one, not even Jillian, expected the medicine to work. But Ghislaine was already confident in the results. Jillian turns to him and asks how he knew about this cure when even divine power couldn't heal her. To this, Ghislaine explains that the priest's divine powers aren't omnipotent. They enhance the body's vitality and strengthen its regenerative abilities, helping it fight the illness. But that's different from offering a fundamental cure. The man's hands tremble as he reaches out to our boy, asking if his daughter will actually be cured. Ghislaine gives the father the positive response he's been longing for. He reassures Jillian that it will take a couple of months, but guarantees that his daughter will be completely cured. The man's eyes widen in disbelief. As big and strong as he is, he falls to his knees, bows his head, and humbly asks what our boy could possibly want in return. Since Ghislaine came all this way, there must be a good reason. However, the old man tells him up front that he has nothing much to offer, other than his useless body. If Ghislaine needs him to become his dog, so be it. He'll follow every command and be his slave. But Ghislaine makes it clear that he doesn't need a slave. What he needs is Jillian, the captain of the Ratatosk mercenaries. When the old man looks up, he's shocked to see the familiar eyes of a dreamer. Jillian quickly stands up, picks up his axe, and removes his long ponytail. Now he looks like an absolute giant, exuding an aura of power and confidence. He asks if anyone else has come here aside from him and his party. Ghislaine confirms that it's just him and his 3 companions. The man then asks if there's anyone with a grudge against him, to which Ghislaine confidently replies that there is, and there will be more in the future. With that said, the giant man grabs his harpoon, and after imbuing it with mana, he launches it with godly speed. The harpoon drills straight through his hut and into the forest. Moments later, as he pulls the rope back, the prey caught on the harpoon emerges, a man lodged in its barbs. Jillian grabs the intruder with his massive hand, his grip like a vice, and demands to know who sent him. The spy, however, seems more interested in how Gillian even knew he was hiding in the woods. Turning to our boy, Gillian asks what he'd like to do with this one. Ghislaine calmly replies that he already knows who sent the man, but he'd prefer not to stain his blade on a day like this. Still, he admits, it seems he has no choice. That's when Jillian stops him from unsheathing his sword and promises to take care of the intruder himself. With that said, Jillian tightens his colossal grip, and the screams of the spy echo through the forest. Once the deed is done, the mercenary respectfully bows to his master. Meanwhile, Belinda is visibly unsettled. Seeing Jillian kill so effortlessly, without hesitation, leaves her shaken. She can't understand why the young master would recruit someone so dangerous. The big guy, on the other hand, falls to his knees and vows that from now on, his life belongs to Ghislaine. In response, our boy offers a confident smile, eager to work with him. The scene then shifts to a lone hut standing in the middle of a swamp. Inside the hut, the wildcat traffickers are in a state of confusion as the report reveals that a reconnaissance unit has been killed. That's when the senior member speaks up, urging everyone to simmer down. This man is Virgo, the captain of the squad. Virgo then states that, according to Bernaf's intel, Ghislaine shouldn't even have been able to find the reconnaissance unit, let alone kill them. He wonders if the unit was incompetent or if the intel was wrong. It's then the reporter reports that Jillian has joined Ghislaine's group. The captain becomes enraged, grabbing the reporter by the throat and angrily demanding confirmation. The poor guy barely manages to respond, confirming once again that he saw it with his own eyes. Virgo is fascinated by this news because he never expected that big guy to get back into killings again. And apparently, it looks like Virgo was also part of Ratatosk mercenaries group. The scene transitions back to our party, where this time, Gillian is driving the carriage. Inside, Belinda finds herself suffocating from all the weaponry loaded into the carriage. She wonders if Jillian really had to bring so much stuff. Couldn't he have just brought a sword or two? She wonders if he's some kind of arms dealer. In the other carriage, Fergus and Ricardo are acting as rear guard, keeping watch from behind. Meanwhile, our boy tries to remind Belinda that Jillian will definitely put these weapons to use, so she'll have to bear it for now. The most important thing is to escape this rift safely. The lady then speaks about the spy they captured, mentioning that she's sure it must have been sent by Amelia. She finds this troubling because the mask that the spy wore was a symbol used by the wildcat traffickers, a powerful guild in Rayfold. Their main trades are smuggling, assassination, drugs, and human trafficking, among others. They are filthy scum who take on all the vile work. Among them are many skilled former mercenaries, making them a shadowy guild with considerable combat power. Ghislaine is quite bewildered that Belinda knows so much, especially since she only stays in the castle. In response, she simply states that she heard a lot about it before she started working here. In any case, she explains that the enemy is persistent, so he better be careful. Ghislaine warms to her concern, noting how much she values him. He reassures her that he will be fine because now they have Jillian with them. Suddenly, the ground beneath them starts to shift. Two assassins emerge and start following their carriage from both directions. In the next moment, they spring out of the sand to strike at Gillian. But this gigachad of a man grabs a sword in one hand and an axe in the other, effortlessly blocking both attackers' strikes simultaneously. Not only does he block them, but he twists his weapon so quickly that the assassins' arms are torn off from their bodies. And with his next move, Gillian cuts through both of them like they were nothing. More of these men appear, quickly activating the traps they've set up. Giant logs start to fall toward them, but before they can be crushed, Gillian takes control of the reins. He yanks the bridle, and the horses slam on the brakes. In a matter of seconds, the area is crawling with these creepy assassins, all armed with weapons embedded in their hands. That's when Virgo mentions Gillian as the former captain of the Ratatosk mercenaries. He calls him a coward for disbanding the entire group just because of his daughter. Gillian doesn't seem to vibe with the accusations this unknown bastard is throwing at him. Virgo continues, saying that after the group was disbanded, he had to live a life he never wanted. He tells Gillian not to act senile, as if he can't even remember his former peer. It seems that Gillian actually doesn't remember this creepy man. But Virgo is convinced that he's just pretending to play dumb. But Virgo is looking forward to making Gillian remember his old colleagues, and promptly signals his lackeys to charge. Our boy asks if he should step in to help, but Virgo simply replies that it's all okay. These bastards clearly have business with him, so he assures Ghislaine that he doesn't need to bother. As soon as those creepy bastards get close to pierce Gillian with their swords, this gigachad of a man cuts through them like they're vegetables. A few more charge from the other direction, but Gillian prepares himself and cuts down the first one in line. When the second tries to attack, he too has his hands ripped apart. Virgo, watching from the sidelines, had expected this outcome. After all, Gillian held the position of captain for a reason. Since direct attacks are pointless against this brute of a man, Virgo orders his units to split into two groups and take him on from both sides. But Gillian quickly hops onto his horse, axe in hand, charging at these bastards. With a single swing of his axe, he obliterates them, not letting a single one come close. Seeing no chance of getting closer, the men then decide to aim for the horse first, but they stand no chance. Gillian is swinging his axe like a blender, cutting down everyone in his path, leaving the ground a bloody mess. Finally, Virgo himself jumps into the fray, but Gillian quickly safeguards himself with his shield. Virgo, seething with rage since Gillian ruined his life, declares that he won't let him ruin his plans as well. For that, Gillian must die. The bastard quickly kills the horse Gillian was riding, but our big guy quickly jumps off, unharmed. Virgo doesn't waste any time and comes charging with his blade, but the old man quickly blocks the direct hit with his axe. In the middle of the fight, he reminds this bastard that he's no longer the captain of the Ratatosk mercenaries. One crushing blow from our old hero leaves this sucker in pain, and Gillian further throws him away with ease. Virgo is in shambles after just one hit. Blood leaks from his mouth as he questions who the captain is if it's not him. In response, Gillian begins to channel his mana, calmly stating that he has discarded his past. He is now nothing but young Lord Ghislaine's subordinate. This leaves Virgo utterly bamboozled. He furiously charges like a madman, realizing that this bastard is acting so nonchalant after destroying his life. The exchange of blows begins again, both warriors pushing themselves to overpower the other. But it's clear that the one struggling is Virgo, who is only acting out of sheer frustration. He reminds Gillian that the mercenary company was disbanded after he left, and thanks to Gillian's decision, Virgo lost his power and ended up living a disgraceful life just to survive. The old man doesn't respond to Virgo's words. Instead, he continues to swing strike after strike, relentlessly attacking Virgo. But finally, Virgo manages to render the old man's shield useless with a powerful kick. Virgo makes it clear that he had been prepared to sacrifice his entire life to make the Ratatosk mercenaries the best in history. But Gillian threw it all away, only to end up as a mere pawn of a spoiled noble. For that, Virgo isn't sure he can ever forgive him. He finally throws his deadly ninja daggers, but the old man swings his axe around and deflects 3 of the blades. Right then, Virgo charges in with a dagger in hand, but it zips past Gillian as their clash continues. No matter how strong Gillian may have been, Virgo is confident that he is not as powerful as he was when he was captain just a few years ago. While Gillian wasted his time trying to cure his daughter, Virgo is glad that he put himself through countless battles to grow stronger. He's pretty sure this Walmart version of Zeus is no match for him now. Virgo quickly picks up the 3 daggers from the ground and throws them directly at Gillian. But the gigachad Gillian stops them with his bare hand as if they are nothing. When Virgo charges again, Gillian swings his axe once more. Virgo avoids the hit, coming mere inches away from the old man's skull. Gillian quickly imbues his hand with mana and stops the dagger mid-air, He then spoke to Virgo, asking if this was really all the reason he had for seeking vengeance. Virgo is caught off guard after seeing Jillian channel mana just to catch the dagger. It does not take him long to realize that Jillian had not been showing his true strength until now. Before Virgo could react, Jillian's axe struck him brutally in the face, sending him flying into a nearby tree with great force. The old man approached, his voice calm but firm as he questioned why Virgo hadn't come for him earlier if all he wanted was revenge. Virgo sneers and admits that he has already visited Jillian's old home, but there's no trace of the Ratatosk mercenaries' captain. All that's left was a feeble old man, too weak to be worth killing. The thought that the man Virgo once looked up to is gone now was brutal. Jillian can clearly see the spirit of a warrior in Virgo, so he tosses his sword to him and unsheathes his other blade. He reminds Virgo about how he is now bound to another's will. But for this moment, he's ready to show his former comrade the highest level of respect as the captain of the Ratatosk mercenaries. For Virgo, this feels like a dream come true. He quickly grabs the dagger and launches himself into battle. The two clash with all their might, their weapons exchanging blows at such speed that only sparks fly. They seem evenly matched, standing on equal footing, until Jillian strikes. He thrusts his blade into Virgo's ribs with brutal force. Despite the savage blow, Virgo refuses to give up. He pushes forward and retaliates back, but his last attack is futile, and Jillian is on the verge of severing Virgo's head. In that moment, Jillian speaks. He promises his former comrade that he will remember him as the 5th unit commander of the Ratatosk mercenaries, Virgo Villanos. For Virgo, it's a heartwarming moment. To be recognized by the captain of the Ratatosk mercenaries fills him with pride. He smiles one last time before Jillian's sword ends the life of this proud warrior. Once the fight is officially over, Jillian grabs the dagger his comrade was using. Ghislaine also comes out of the carriage with Belinda, and the first thing they notice is the shit ton of limbs and dead bodies scattered around. Belinda comments how they could easily bring in quite a bit of money by looting these dead bodies. Jillian bows his head in apology for the unnecessary delays, but our boy reassures him that there's no need to worry about it. He then can't help but recognize just how exceptional Jillian is, far more than he had originally thought. You see, in Ghislaine's previous life, when he first left home to start his mercenary work, the stories about Jillian were a significant influence in laying the foundation for him to eventually become the mercenary king. Now, he's grateful that his quick actions have earned him such a reliable comrade. He then notices Jillian holding onto the dagger Virgo was using, so he asks the big guy if he knew that person. Jillian quickly confirms that he does remember this person. He even mentions that they were once old comrades. The mention of old comrades causes Ghislaine to reflect on his friends from his previous life. He wonders what they might be doing now. Since he had not met them at this time in his previous life, he's sure they are living their own lives. But he plans to find them and recruit them into his party as well. Anyway, now that everything is cleared, he decides to follow Belinda's suggestion and gather anything valuable these guys have. The lady happily acknowledges it and commands Jillian to take the lead and collect them for us. But the brute warrior reminds her that he is not her subordinate. 2 days later, we find ourselves in Perdium territory after many days. Our party has finally made it into their land after riding for what feels like forever. The brute asks if this is Perdium, to which our boy confirms. When Ghislaine peeks at his territory through the carriage, he feels good to have a home to return to. When he first ran away from home, he thought he would be able to come back at any time, but he was dead wrong. He then turns to Jillian and asks for his opinion about this place. The brute is momentarily caught off guard to hear this and is not sure how to respond, so he just says it's great. But our boy knows that this place is awful, and as much as Jillian hates to admit it, it's indeed in a bad state. All the houses are outdated, renovations are out of the question, and the fields are completely uncultivated. All the farmers have been conscripted into the military, leaving the land forcibly fallow. Gillian then reveals the rumors he has heard that Perdium is always at war because of the northern barbarians, but after seeing it firsthand, the situation is worse than Gillian had expected. To which my guy states that this is one of the many problems he wants to resolve, and this is precisely why he needs the strength of the Ratatosk mercenaries captain. He's sure it will be a long battle, a battle to eliminate everything connected to Duke Delphine and to protect what was taken for granted. Our boy will revive this land no matter what. Once they finally make their way through the pavement of the castle, Belinda is shocked when she notices something unexpected in their way. The man in front of them is actually our boy's father, the man who had been missing since the beginning of this series.